Now, you need to know that Eric has been on this campus around 50 years, and he's a brilliant speaker. I've talked to several of the gentlemen that have worked with him, and they said he is indeed the most gifted speaker that we have on this campus. And I'm anxious to hear that, and I've given him a high bar today, but he can handle it. And I want to thank him for coming. We are so fortunate to have him. Let's welcome our speaker, Dr. Eric Anderson.
Wow, that was a very nice introduction. I remember something Lyndon Johnson said on an occasion where he got a wonderful introduction. He said, "I wish my parents were alive to hear that. My father would have enjoyed it, and my mother would have believed it." I'm particularly delighted to be with this audience because there's so many things you know that the audiences I ordinarily face don't know. For example, you know how to read cursive handwriting. And a number of you can say, oh yeah, I remember Eisenhower or Truman, or in the case of Terry Tribbett, Abraham Lincoln. Now I'm feeling rather old today because it was almost exactly 50 years ago that Rianda and I arrived in Angwin. We thought we were rich. We were being paid $11,000 a year. And we stopped drinking powdered skim milk because we were so rich. Well, I taught for a number of years here at PUC. Then I went over to the dark side and became an administrator for a while. And then came back to PUC in 2015. And for the last 10 years, I've spent a lot of time trying to preserve local history. Again and again, I've been really surprised. In many cases, some good things have disappeared. But in most cases, most of the time, I'm delighted to discover things that have been preserved. And whether I'm looking at the library storage in the old winery, or looking at the vault where rare books are kept, I'm pleased again and again to see those are still there. Nobody got rid of that. There are some sad stories. The saddest one I know involves the papers of Malcolm Maxwell, president of PUC for 17 years. I got in touch with his daughter and said, I know he was very well organized. He had all these papers, correspondence relating to the history of the college. What happened to that? She said, well, it was her job as literary executor of her father to take care of those papers. And there was a 3-car garage filled with these exquisitely organized papers. But she got the idea that they were confidential papers, and it was her job to destroy them. And so all those went to the landfill somewhere. Some of them could be preserved in other copies. But like I say, that's a relatively rare encounter where something really valuable is gone. Time again you find something good that's been preserved. Well, I've titled this talk, What's a Name? PUC's Attic. And I will be talking about some of the things that are not on display, but also talk about some of the things that are there. I often like to lead a walking tour of campus, but maybe that wouldn't be appropriate today. We could have a kind of a virtual walking tour, an imaginary walking tour, a hypothetical walking tour. PUC moved here in 1909. It had been established in 1882 in Healdsburg, and then the school went through a series of crises. It had some investments in industries that didn't work out. Its debt got to be greater and greater. And finally, the college closed. And there was a year interruption, and then they came here and purchased Angwin's Resort. Now, what's left from that? And you might think, what, there's a resort at the top of Howell Mountain? This whole area had resorts. Not only was there a resort here, you go down just a little bit downhill toward Pope Valley, there was a hotel called Woodworth's. Or you go out to Etna Springs. People would come out by train from San Francisco and then take a carriage or maybe a car a little bit later out to someplace like Etna Springs or Walter Springs. And then they would engage in golf and hunting and croquet or whoever knows what. Well, what's left? If we were on a walking tour this morning, where would you go to find anything from 1909? Can you think of anything left from that? There were all these cottages where people stayed. There was a dance hall. Of course, we don't have a dance hall, you know. There was a swimming pool. Not the one we have now, but a newer one. There were barns. There was a little herd of pigs, too. So, where would you go? Actually, the only thing left that I know about from 1909 is the wall and the gate for Granger Hall. You go over there, there's a stone wall, there's a gate, there's a little marker honoring the Angwin family, and that's it. All those other buildings are gone, I think. Yeah.
Isn't the PUC elementary gym one of the
The
original?
gym was not there in 1909, but it's an old building. And it is one of the things that was on the college campus and moved to the elementary school campus. If we look around the campus in other areas, there are some other old buildings. Groff Hall is one of the oldest. Irwin Hall was built in 1919, but that part, as you may know, is gone. If we also really look closely on our walking tour, we could find a few signs of Healdsburg. And I think most of you would immediately recognize, if you go down by the church, just outside this door, you have the the bell tower, and that bell comes from Healdsburg College. We also have in storage some old benches that were first in Healdsburg College, and then they were in Irwin Hall. I'm not sure what to do with those old benches. I thought of bringing them over here, but then maybe somebody would sit on them, and we'd have a problem. We have another very old item, and that would be a chair that was preserved from the original hotel. Now, I have some pictures here of that original hotel. This one right here shows the building that stood where Granger Hall stands now. Imagine if we had that building today, a beautiful Victorian era, maybe Edwardian era hotel. It was used as a dormitory for years, and interesting enough, somebody, the first day of school, went through and took pictures all the way through. And you could see over here, there is a picture of the hallways of that hotel. And then there's another picture of one of the lounge areas. We were quite lucky that somebody did that. Somebody managed to take a picture right there at the beginning. Now, so you might say, wait a minute, history didn't begin in 1909. Are there things from earlier at PUC? It's a custom nowadays, people want to have some sort of a land acknowledgement or apology to the Indians. There weren't any Indians who were displaced in 1909. We do have some interesting Indian relics are here. And one of the most interesting is over on that table, a grinding stone that was discovered when the gas station went in over here, the Chevron station. They were excavating And you see, if you look closely a little later, it is a grinding stone made out of volcanic rock, which I think is pretty unusual. Now, lots of people around Angwin will have Indian grinding stones, arrowheads, spearheads, so on. But that is all, as far as PUC is concerned, from the prehistory. Now, what else do we have here that comes out of PUC's attic? What else could we find on our walking tour? We have many things that represent the history of PUC. We even have things that represent some rather far-flung places, and we have things that represent our mission tradition. Some of the most mysterious things on this table will fit in that category. Let me say a little bit about what we've put on these tables. I'll see if I can get this mic to follow me. What in the world is this? This is from the pipe organ in Irwin Hall, which in itself had an interesting history. I think it was purchased from a church in Fairfield. I could even... We also have many, probably 20 or 30 of these bigger pipes in storage. They seem to me to be very precious. I'm not sure what to do with them. I'm not sure how you perhaps could display them. They are, again, from that old pipe organ. And then other things that fit in with our mission history. We have over here something that I think is a battle axe from the South Seas. We have a spear, and I don't know where that spear came from. And there are many examples of things like that where we don't really know where they came from. Here is, and we have hundreds of magic lantern slides from, so I suppose, around 1900, 1910, 1920. This box, and you can look at these later, has a whole series of pictures of Jerusalem as it existed around 1910. Come from a shop called the American Colony Shop. And there are these magic lanterns showing, well, here's one showing a man locking up the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, sometimes we will have things that we will find in storage that turn out to be false or misleading. This is my favorite one, and I think I could spend about an hour with a group of college students. Ask him to look at this box. This box has a label in it. I've been here long enough, I recognize who wrote the label. It was Gary Scherer. And it says Lake County Human Bones and Beads. And I can pass that around if you like. The question I would ask the students is, well, what do we do with human remains? What is the ethical way to deal with those human remains? And what do you say about those other things in the box? What's the responsibility of the historian? Well, you can spend probably half an hour, 45 minutes agonizing, wringing your hands about that. There is a basic question before you get to the agonizing. And that is, are those human remains? I went over to the biology department. They said, no, those teeth come from a goat. And the little plastic beads are not prehistoric either. So we're not quite sure what's there, but it's not something that's quite what it's cracked up to be. Somebody found that in his yard, brought it to us. Now, we have other things that are much more believable and accurate, and I would love to have a way to display them appropriately. We had a man who was a missionary in the Monument Valley area. And as I went through all of the things in the PUC collection, I found these beautiful pots, I think Navajo pots, that he collected around 1940, and they have the name of the artist, the person who made them. And those are just sitting in a cardboard box. Those, I think, are very valuable, very authentic. It would be wonderful to have a way to display those. Oh, are you wondering what this is? You need to have a gavel at every meeting. This gavel, well, Bill Hemmerlin knows all about this gavel. This gavel is the, well, it's the badge of office for the president of the Men of Granger.
We stole it.
Well, that's right.
We stole it.
Do you want to make a confession, Ellie? Why is this thing pink?
We stole it. We painted it pink and took it back to the Men of Granger.
So the women's club stole this thing and then painted it. Here's Larry Downing's name, by the way. I think this is sturdy enough. We can pass that around too.
Well, Eric, they can come look at it.
I'll come back and see.
It's too big.
Now we
Swinging
find
this around.
some things in our attic that we absolutely do not know what to do with. Some things you would want to display, and some things you might not want to display. For example, I found that in our attic. A human skull in a little basket with no label, no explanation. Now, I happen to know where this came from because I gave it to the school. When Laura and I were teachers in Borneo in 1970, 71, we visited a village that had become Christian. And this human skull was no longer something they wanted. It represented a dark past, something negative, and they wanted to get rid of it. And we said, okay, we'll take it. Never thinking, what do we do with this? Is this something you hang by your mantle? What value is this? We had some interesting adventures bringing it home. On the way home, we stopped as tourists in Saigon. I was aware that my draft number was 26, and I might be coming back as other than a tourist. But this was in our bag. And the customs guy was really grossed out by these strange Americans who traveled around with this thing. This is an example of something that would be in our collection that we wouldn't know what to do with, and it's just an accident that I know where it came from. But I still haven't figured out what's the proper, useful, valuable way to display this. Is it, well, we haven't figured out something like that. What's that?
In the theology department.
In the theology department.
What happens when you go to the Californians?
Now I have another item that showed up in our collection that I absolutely am. I don't know what to do with it. Clark, will you help me with this? All right, this was a gift to PUC. If you'll grab one end and I'll hang on to the other. Now, this was not a gift from some sort of admirer of Hitler. This is an American soldier at the end of World War II who went by a building with this on it and said, "I'll bring this home as spoils of war."
Upside down.
It's upside down.
Well, it is upside down. Maybe that's appropriate. I don't know.
Bingo.
We'll get the even. Now, I think it would be fair to say that if we hung this up in the library, that would be a mistake. We do have all kinds of things in our collection, but nothing quite as provocative as this, I guess. So what do I do with this? Right now, I just keep it in a box in the back room. We don't hang it up. I suppose one thing you could do with it is, sell it to some sort of World War II collector. It may be, and somebody did a little research on this, it may be that this is a very unusual flag. It's not a typical party flag or military flag. It's something used for some kind of civil office, and maybe it's valuable to somebody. Anyway, any suggestions? I don't think anybody's recommending that I put that up. It's interesting to see the reactions people have to that. I took the Board of Trustees through the Art Center, showed them, all of the archival stuff, brought that out. One of our board members is Niels Erik Andreasen, born in Denmark. And he had a very strong reaction to that. He remembered as a child what that symbolized, what it meant. Now, we have other things that are not quite as dramatic. This one I particularly like, and many of you here will remember Owen Hall Chapel, which was taken down in about 1982 after a big debate among the faculty and staff, what should be done with it. And there was in that building a beautiful chapel with wonderful woodwork and then a ceiling like this, pressed in. A lot of people felt that the building could have been preserved if you began with the focus on historical preservation. But that wasn't done, and as a result, this is the sort of thing that we have left from that building. Now, I'm showing you various things that are truly attic kinds of things that aren't on display, that at some point we may find a way to use them and display them. But the fact is, what we have is, well, let me put it this way, what I haven't shown you is more significant than what I have shown you. We have a wide range of photographs. I think, Patrick, I heard it was 40,000 photographs that we have, something like that. And then we have a tremendous collection of documents. The most interesting documents we have are correspondence, letters. Oh, that's something you old folks should remember too. People wrote letters once. And these are extremely valuable. At the heart of our collection is the collection of Walter Utt's papers. Walter Utt was a teacher here from the 1950s to the 1980s, and he had the habit of writing to his students long after they graduated. And so we will have literally hundreds of letters from Walter Utt. Fortunately, most of them typed. He had a difficult to decipher left-handed scroll. And in these letters, he illustrates something that is really hard to describe. He is no longer the teacher. He's the mentor, he's the friend. And he will share what's happening on campus, what's happening in the world with his former students. And they're incredibly candid letters. Some people might even say they're gossipy letters. But if you're interested in the history of the Adventist Church or PUC, it's all there. And it's there in tremendous detail. We have other people who have given us that kind of documentation. And those are all stored in the Waldrott Center, the new building, the new addition to the library, and prepared for scholars to use. In addition to the Waldrott papers, we have Fred Veltman's papers. We have Walter Ray's papers, who did a lot of research on Ellen White's literary sources. We have, one of my favorites is Larry Mitchell. Anybody remember Larry Mitchell? He was the kind of guy that kept really perfect records. And if he had a phone conversation with somebody, he'd write a memo about it 5 minutes later and put it in the file. And if you want to study what happened in the crisis years around 1980, he's got all kinds of interesting stuff. Now, I'm a little bit frustrated because I was hoping to find in the Larry Mitchell papers evidence of a legend. Back in the period around 1980, there were a lot of people who felt that PUC was going in the wrong direction. And a group of those had a meeting at a place called Watts Barn. And they were going to simply get together and talk about how our theology department had gone in the wrong direction. Well, Larry Mitchell and some of his friends said, let's go to the meeting. Let's hear what they say about us. And Larry kept very detailed records of the meeting. Now, I was looking for something as I read those records that I didn't find, and I'm very disappointed. According to Larry, and I think some others who were at the meeting, this meeting went on for a number of hours talking about the sins of the theology department. And finally, someone got up and said, who are we to criticize? Some of us here in this very room have not yet gotten the victory over mayonnaise. Now, he didn't write that in the notes, so can I keep telling that story? I don't know. In our family, we talk a lot about the victory over mayonnaise. We keep getting new collections of materials that people want to give us, and it's a difficult experience because so much of this needs processing. It needs to be organized, you need to have a finding aid. Already we're getting scholars who come and look at these papers, particularly people who have written about Adventist history. But we have other things as well. Adventists, among other things, like other people, sometimes like to engage in hyperbole. But let me say, without any danger of exaggerating, that in addition to all the other things we have on campus, we have the world's greatest collection of materials about Pitcairn Island. You know, the great story of the mutiny on the Bounty and these guys who go off to an uninhabited place and think they're safe there. Well, Herbert Ford, over a number of years, collected a great deal of material on that, and we have a whole room dedicated to that. If we were on a walking tour, we'd stop and we would look at the pigtails that are in that display case. A few years ago, Herb Ford purchased some pigtails. The sailors in those days always had their hair all kind of greased up in pigtails that supposedly belonged to the Bounty mutineers. And then he went to work trying to find out if it was true. And in the process, he involved the FBI and Scotland Yard. And at one point, somebody from one of those agencies came and took some samples. They told our staff workers they had to wear this something covering so their hair didn't get mixed up with it. Katie Van Arsdale was the archivist at that time, and they didn't want to have any long blonde hairs mixed in. And I think, have we gotten the last word on that, Patrick? We don't know yet, but we think we'll soon know whether those are authentic. They did research through the mother's line of these sailors, and they think they'll be able to tell whether those are authentic or not. That is another unusual thing. But the whole Pitcairn Island collection is a very valuable one. Now, in addition to what's in storage, in addition to the Pitcairn Center, in addition to what's in the HUD collection, as I say, we get new donations all the time. I had the experience of going up to Earl Odnard's house in Chico after his death. His brother and his son were going through his papers and his collection. And I was delighted. I was bowled over to find about 80 letters that Walter had sent to Earl. Letters that, in his typical fashion, talked about what's going on at PUC, what's going on in politics. He had some interesting comments about Richard Nixon. What was it he said about him? He was comparing him to certain French politicians. That would be the way to thought through things. And we get other collections as well. Still, I want to get back to what Manny suggested at the beginning. We need a museum. And the museum really would not be restricted to PUC. If we look at this whole area of Howell Mountain, you quickly find there's a lot of other historical material that needs to be preserved. The hospital has a wonderful vault with all kinds of amazing stuff in it. If you go farther down the hill into Pope Valley, there are people who've saved a lot of things about Pope Valley. One of my most precious possessions is a book published about 1935 by one of the most prominent Hollywood screenwriters of that period, a woman named Frances Meriden. She grew up in Pope Valley, and she wrote a novel called The Valley People. She said it was a novel, but it must have been pretty close to the truth, because the people in Pope Valley were enraged by this book. I understand they burned it in some cases. It was a kind of book that spilled the secrets about a little rural community who was a town drunk, who had this terrible scandal in his or her life. There are very few chapters in the book that are cheerful. They're mostly expose kinds of things. Well, it would be very interesting to find out what was behind that book. And there are people in Pope Valley who've collected and saved and so on. I would be delighted if we could have some kind of museum on this campus that would draw people from all over this area that would say, here's what happened on Howell Mountain. And we haven't said really very much about the prehistory. We haven't said anything about the Mexican and Spanish period. Many of our names go back to that time. The land grants that come from the Mexican government and so on. You could really have a very interesting collection of things. And I think things would come out of the woodwork. People would come forward and say, oh, I have this, I have that. And they'd be happy to share them. So that's what's in PUC's attic. Much of it is just gathering dust, but it's been saved. And one other thing I didn't mention, and that is the vault of the library. The vault includes a whole range of very precious old books. It's in a supposedly fireproof place. I think it probably would keep the fire at bay for a couple of hours. And it includes all sorts of things. The most interesting thing in the vault is a Bible published in 1519 in Venice, an illustrated Bible. We have a number of other things there. One of the most interesting to me is a collection of photographs of Peking China, as it was called then, in the 1920s. It was done by two Adventist printers, the White brothers, and they made an absolutely spectacular book. And we have one of the copies of that book. We have a book, we have Sojourner Truth's autobiography, published by the Battle Creek Press. We have books published by, or written by John Quincy Adams. We have an old newspaper announcing the death of George Washington. And we bring it out and show it to our students. And they read that story, and then they look on the back page and say, oh, wait a minute, here's an advertisement for a runaway slave. Mm-hmm. And it's a very powerful teaching experience. Those are all in the vault. There are some sad things in the vault as well. One of the sad things is a copy of Virgil's Aeneid, translated by John Dryden, published in 1697. And you look at the title page, and there's a little line that's been razored out. And the line that's razored out says 26 ribs, or something like that. And someone, before we got that book, took all the pictures out. Beautiful, beautiful engravings. The book as it stands is probably worth $5,000 or $6,000. It'd be worth $20,000 or $30,000 if you have the pictures in it. There's even a book there that someone gave us that is a collection of maps of Southeast Asia. And the only thing that's left is the captions. Somehow we got that as well. So if we think about the vault, we think about the Ut Center with its collections, we think about the Pitcairn Island Center, and we think about storage. PUC has a great deal of very significant historical material. And I would love to hear ways to promote use of that, to protect it, to preserve it. We've been lucky so far, and that most of that has survived. I suppose we could get unlucky at some point, and someone would say, oh, what do we need those old pipes? Or why do we want that spear? What do we do with that? So far, that hasn't happened. Well, questions from the audience. You can probably smell the food over there.
Get the mic.
I had a question about probably one of the finest field actual history museums in any college or university. How did PUC acquire that? And the second question is, the observatory, when was that built and is it still being used?
Well, we had two different observatories. You can see the first one is sort of lying along the airport there. It's not in use. The later one, I'm not sure when that was built. And is it not being used now?
It's being used.
I think it may. Yeah, Richard.
Mm-hmm.
It needs some repairs. And they do have funds for the repairs, but getting the parts that they need, because it's older, has been hard. And they haven't been able to find them yet. But it was open occasionally to the community and all that, so I think it's important.
How recently was it open?
Oh, it hasn't been for, I don't know. I would guess something like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Wasn't that built in the early 70s?
I thought it was earlier than that, but you may be right. It was here when I got here.
I think 1964.
64, a physicist says. Yes.
The one that was on the field, where the observatory that was on the field.
Well,
I'm witness to the assembling of that. So
yeah.
they did finally find someone to donate it to, and he came and very carefully disassembled it and took it to his home and reassembled it there. But when they opened it up, it was built in 35. When they opened it up, everything that they needed, the lenses, the telescope still rotated. Everything was still inside, just like everything she needed.
You're talking about the first observatory. Yeah.
Hey, Eric, tell us a little bit more about Angwin. I remember when I first came here in '65, I think it was. We came up Old Hell Road, came right through the middle of the campus. That's where they had the road, what we have now. And the market, where was that? And the gas station?
Yeah, it's important. The business of the roads, the main county road went right to campus. And I believe that was under Rittenhouse. That was changed, and they exchanged, or maybe even earlier, they exchanged some land and so moved the main county road where it is now. The market used to be at the corner where Priest's construction is now. And even before that, it was in the old physics building. Yeah.
West Hall Annex.
Yeah.
A couple things. I just want to put a word out for the chimney sweeps that happen at Rianda once a year. It's fascinating to watch these birds swirl around and go down the chimney at that wheel. The Hess blacksmith down the bottom of the hill, that's been here since mid-1800s. And there's a stone building on Cold Spring, just past where that turns into Las Posadas. That's got to be over 100 years old.
And that has been restored in some ways. You mentioned the house blacksmith shop.
Yes.
It is something that closed up about 1956. I've been in there, you've probably been in there. They just closed the doors, and everything is still there. All the tools. It's really quite remarkable. Once a year, I think they open it up.
Open up to the public once a year.
Yeah.
Where is it?
It is right at the bottom of the hill, just across the road from the service station there. Yes.
My maternal and paternal grandmothers both married, they each married their husbands in 1906. That came here to, I believe, the hotel, and that was their getaway from cooking and all of the rest of it. They took the train, they were then taken by carriage and then eventually cars, you say.
Yeah.
We children would visit Grandma and Nonna each summer, when we would come in by car and climb the stairs. And I remember the big porch. I know that corridor that you have a photo of. And it was ladies. I don't remember a single man on the property. Just, is that still that part still existing? I know that there's part, when I pass it, if I walk up there, it still looks sort of like
I don't think anything is left of the hotel except the foundation. And if you go into the basement of Granger Hall, you can see some of the foundation. It was used as a college dorm for a number of years. Kind of took a beating, and finally they took it down. But yeah.
Pacific Union College has been very significant in the history of Avondale College.
Oh yes.
And when I was in my early teens, George Cavaniss and W.T. Hyde and their families came out as exchange professors. That was because the Australian government refused to allow Avondale to grant degrees, and so PUC came in and granted degrees to Australian teachers and ministers who never ever got into the Northern Hemisphere. I wondered in your research whether you had found correspondence in regard to that affiliation that was developed back then.
I don't think that correspondence is in the archives. It's probably still in the active records of the academic dean's office or something like that. Yeah, a number of people did that. It continued up until, I think, the 1970s. I know Niels Erik Andreasen was one of those who went to Avondale. My Uncle George was one, and we were all amazed by the things he brought back from Australia. And we noticed that our cousin, who was about 5 years old, spoke differently than when she left.
Can you tell us about the name? There's a phone book at Elms Haven from 1912, and it listed it as Pacific College. And then I went to the biographies of Mrs. White, and in there it talked about how they acquired this.
Yeah, there's a very interesting story on the acquiring of this land. They first were looking at a property over there in St Helena, near a major winery now. And the brethren who were involved in this seemed to see some opportunity for personal profit. And it looked like it was going to be a difficult thing, so they didn't go to that place and they came here instead. They also were quite unhappy at Healdsburg that over the years the town encroached more and more on what they had. And Ellen White, in a very memorable phrase, said, "While men slept, the devil sewed houses." I think Sabre Langdon adopted that slogan a few years ago when there was talk of a big development here. Now, I have an interesting document I want to give you before we forget. Yeah.
I was going to ask, I was told once that one of the reasons that this was picked was that we would never run out of water. And we were setting on aquifers, and that we would have ample water forever. Is that true?
Well, I think that was one of the considerations, that they had lots of water, and that was good. And if you talk to Dale Withers, who is in charge of our facilities management, he will remind you just how important that is. And he will be surprised at how many times we make decisions without considering that. We've had times when we were almost ready to sell the water, or big pieces of, big portions of it. And Dale was pretty shocked by that. So far, it didn't happen.
How old is Donna White's house?
Well, she died in 1915. She moved there early 20th century. And it was someone else who had built that house. So I think the house is probably
The Pratts.
sort of like late 19th century. I don't know the exact answer
It
on
was
that.
built in 1885.
Okay, there you go. Does that count as late 19th century?
The hospital was first,
Yes,
then the Pratt House,
And you-
then the college.
and you have Merritt Kellogg involved in the founding of that. Yeah.
The question I asked earlier about the biology museum.
Oh, yeah.
Taxidermy assessment, which, how do they get, that's an incredible collection.
There was a donor who was very interested in PUC, and he was courted for a number of years. And I think at a certain point, there's an untold story about the man needed to be kind of brought along. He was not sure he wanted to give this. And the college sent Kelly Lynn to talk to him instead of the president, I guess. And in the end, he went ahead with that. You know what he's talking about. In the basement, the lowest level of the biology building, There's quite a natural history collection. Terry, you know more about that, I'm sure, than I do. What was the man's name?
Wilmer Hanson.
Yeah.
Wilmer Hanson.
Yeah. And then
He was a plastic surgeon by trade, but his passion was big game hunting. Back in the days before there was quite an interest in protecting different species. And one of the dilemmas that we had in deciding whether or not to build the space and to accept that donation was what kind of message this was going to send to our existing and former students about whether or not we supported that kind of treatment of animals. And anyway, we finally opted by some margin to decide to go ahead and accept them and display them.
And the wing itself was, the money was given by Stanton May, right?
Well, they made a lot. I don't remember the exact figures, but they made quite a contribution to that. Yes.
A successful physician who started out as the janitor in that building.
But you're right to give so much credit to Kelly Lynn.
Yeah.
She was the key player in humoring this guy over a period of time that allowed the gift to finally occur. And we can't give too much credit to her.
Yeah, she really. Morning.
There's an addition to the original animal collection. A cousin of mine living in Roseburg, Oregon, had a number of specimens that he had collected as a hunter in Africa and in Montana. And upon his death, his widow asked me if I knew of any place where they might be given. And I asked the college and I asked the biology department, and we drove up there and took back, I think, about 10 specimens, 6 of which are in the building, 4 of which were traded for other things. But it is really quite remarkable what is there. And the questions about hunting and preservation and so forth were really quite argued at that time when asking about whether they would take my cousin's collection as well.
That needs to be on our hypothetical walking tour as well. I wanted to just give you an example, just to close, of the kind of documents that have been preserved, show up, and we're surprised to find them.
Are there any graves in Angwin?
Are there any graves in Angwin? Well, the only graves I know about would be out on the state forest land. There's a family plot out there where there's several graves. Is that what you were thinking of? Yeah, I don't know of any others. But there may be. What I'm passing out is a document that turned up about 7 or 8 years ago. It showed up in an interesting file that was made for maps, thin drawers, and Katie Van Arsdale found one page of this. Well, it's actually 2 pages of this 4-page document. The document says Ellen G. White at the top. Someone wrote that. It wasn't her handwriting. And she wondered about that. Several months later, she found the rest of the document. And it was there in the files, been there for years, and nobody knew quite what to do with it, and nobody knew if it was authentic or not. What happened next was very revealing. She took a picture of it, shared it with her friends who taught Adventist history around the system, and by the end of the day, we had the document authenticated. People recognized the handwriting, they recognized what was there. The document is a very interesting one in a lot of ways. We probably don't have time to go through it. There's some shocking things in there, like I don't know whether devout Adventists can handle the fact that Ellen White wasn't a very good speller. But just read it, you'll see what I mean. She's responding to a letter from a minister who wants her to do something. And you go through it and you see words like sacred or character and other words that are kind of misspelled off in different directions. If we handed this letter to our college students today, many of them would not be able to read it. And then there was an interesting passage. If you look at the first page, there's she's describing a camp meeting down about 3 or 4 inches. It was a feast to hear their testimonies. Do you see that? And they heard intelligent words, and words came, and then it says, intelligent words of experience came from, and there's a word there. Amen. One of the scholars who looked at that said the word was Mary. Now this could really change Adventist theology. It's actually, the word is many. That was a turning point that didn't turn. Now, in addition to that letter, and I really need to stop, but one other letter we have, completely on the other side of things. A few years after the death of Ellen White, a woman by the name of Margaret Rowland decided that she was Ellen White's successor. And she was determined to prove that she was Ellen White's successor. So she had some associates who went down to Elmshaven, where all the documents were kept, had them pull the fuse and slip into the files a letter that said, Margaret Rowan is my successor. And we have that letter. It is a completely forged letter. And Margaret Rowan, well, she was ready to use fairly rough methods to prove that she was a prophet. When some of her followers came forward and said, yeah, this was a lie, she decided that the solution to that was to kill the follower. And she did attempt to kill a person, and she ended up in San Quentin. How's that for an exciting story? Anyway, we've got the letter that she wrote in handwriting that wasn't Ellen White's handwriting, that said, I've been shown Margaret Rowan is my successor, and she will be kind of a short person, and she looks like this. And if you just pay attention to her, everything will go fine. I've got a copy of that if you want to see it. Well, I think we better stop. There's some food ready. Please think about the history of PUC and Howell Mountain as you go through your own possessions, or maybe you find an Indian grinding stone in your yard or something like that. We need to do better at preserving and communicating what we've experienced here. Thank you.